the goal was never to hit metrics for listeners or anything else. It was simply to do what we say every week. Explore the world of batteries.
Right. And learn something.
Yeah. Embrace the process of going through and embrace the fact that you're trying. And that was our first shot here, was learning. Like, we didn't know who Volta was. We didn't know the voltaic pile. We didn't know Ben Franklin. We didn't know. And it was doing some research. And then it was also just having really smart people and asking them questions, like being inquisitive. So I think there's a little bit of that.
Yeah, just being curious. And the other thing, too, is we didn't get hung up on equipment, scripts.
Yeah.
We just started, and we kept doing it. Welcome to I Like Batteries, the show where we explore the world of batteries. I'm Jeff Lynch.
And I'm Mike Muldoon. Good evening, Jeff Lynch.
Good evening, Mike. It's nice to be here.
It is nice to be here. And you know what's even nicer? Is 200.
200. It's a roundish number, isn't it? It's sort of a milestone type number.
It is. And you know why I'm making a big deal about it?
No.
Because this is our 200th episode.
This is our 200th episode.
It is our 200th episode. Yeah. And I mean, that's a pretty amazing milestone. We did a little bit of research on some podcasts because I would say, 200 episodes in over 4 years.
That's right. We're in our 5th year.
I think, was it January 18th or 19th of 2020 was our first release. I think that when
our first
came
release.
First release.
We can double check this stat, but we will
yeah.
Keep going.
Type of thing that's on there. But the other thing that is important is something that we started early on and reminded a lot of our listeners out there. And before I actually go to this, I want to thank all of our listeners. Thank all those listeners who joined us for episode 200. Those listeners who joined us for multiple episodes, I want to thank all those folks who were people who were on the podcast who we interviewed. There's a lot of them out there, and we'll thank them over subsequent episodes. I do actually want to thank probably our youngest podcast listener, and that's Evan. So Evan, if you're out there listening, hey, thank you for being a great listener for us too. And I want to thank all of our listeners for remembering what a battery is. Now, Jeff, do you remember what actually a battery is? Like if I were to tell you, or how you define a battery?
The definition, this is where we started.
It is where we started.
Our journey of podcasting. So a battery, for all of you who may not know, is a container consisting of one or more cells in which chemical energy is converted into electricity and used as a source of power.
Yeah. And if we break that down, we kind of, through a lot of our episodes, the reason we're bringing this up is this was episode 1. We tried to figure this out and explore the world of batteries as we do every single week. And it started with a container. So understanding realistically, the container size have changed significantly over the course of history, shall we say, and one or more cells, because honestly, there's definitely more than one cell in most of the batteries that we have out there today. And chemical energy, well, that chemical energy has changed over time. We'll go through that in the show. Converted into electricity, and we have a little better understanding about energy density and how much energy is in one of those cells of the batteries as a source of power. And what they're powering today is actually different than when we started episode 1. I mean, there were definitely not as many EVs on the road in 2020 as there are today. There were not as many houses that were powered, and there certainly were not cities that had backup power that were 1.21 gigawatts that are potentially there. And I dropped that in because that's one of our things we would pepper in through most of our episodes as a little bit of Back to the Future reference. The funny thing is, we never thought we would see a battery of that size, and now there are batteries of multiple gigawatts that are out there to be able to be seen. So it's a fun journey. It's a fun ride. Originally, our first show was called Thank You, Ben Franklin. You want to give maybe our listeners a little bit on that, and that being like, well, why would we bring up Ben Franklin?
Yes, it was published on January the 12th.
January 12th. Okay, I was off.
2020. But we were talking about when the first battery was, and we have Ben Franklin to thank for that. So did we update the year? 271 years ago? Or is it now 270?
I think it's 275. It would be 275 if my math is right. But Ben Franklin was he used the term, but ironically, he was not the one who really created the first battery, because he was making a capacitor, essentially. So a capacitor, and here's the thing, Jeff. Do you remember you demonstrated a capacitor on the first episode? Do you remember how you did that? And I know I listened to the episode and you have not, so let's see if you remember.
Oh.
Do you remember how that happened?
I don't.
That's right. You charged up the flash on your
on my camera.
And you could hear the sound, the wee sound when you charged it up, and that's how we demonstrated the capacitor. So how do you like that? Taking it back on what you did, and that was essentially what a capacitor was taking a charge and absorbing it and then letting it go.
Holds that charge and discharges it essentially all at once, is kind of
right,
or as rapidly as it can.
Right, but the difference, as we said, a true battery, chemical energy converted into electricity, and that was done by, do you remember who? I mean, you probably do, because we went over in pre-show, but I'll give you that softball because we'll go for it.
Sorry, you're talking about Volta?
Yeah, I am. Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Alessandro Volta, was that. So for sure. Created the world's first battery, and there's a little bit of, I don't say controversy. It was either 1799 or 1800. Where he created a 2-foot tall stack of zinc and silver discs that were separated by salt-soaked cardboard. It was called a voltaic pile. It was the first human-made battery, allowing us to artificially create, store, and distribute continuous electrical energy. Pretty cool. I mean, that's cool. Definitely something. And if you remember, what kind of noticed this was a gentleman by the name of Galvani, and galvanic current, where he noticed the frog's leg was twitching when he essentially was going to put I think it was a scalpel to it, but there was a little bit of electricity transfer that happened. And he thought it was from the frog's leg, but then he realized it was from something that was soaked a little bit in the zinc, and then when it transferred the current over there, the frog leg moved. So that's essentially how that happened. So,
and you know a thing or two about human movement too. So
when we actually talked about that in episode 1, and how we're using milliamperage to be able to generate some current in terms of getting a muscle to move, which is ironic, Jeff, because we talked a little bit about that and how we would use energy to get a muscle to move, and over years things change in terms of we start to get some things. And as I've been doing a podcast on batteries for over 4 years and 200 episodes, and while still being a physical therapist for now 22 years, I guess it was 18 back then if I do my math correctly. I've had some interesting thoughts about human beings, and I've had a lot of solar panels and wind and a lot of other things, but now I'm generating my own electricity, which I will say tonight's episode on my end is run off of my own energy that I generated via a Rock the Bike generator that I put into an EcoFlow power bank that then I charge the lights and the batteries and everything else up. So a little bit of something that I'm working on called Extra Energy, but more to come for that if you're listening to this show, and maybe a little bit of offshoot here as well. I'm very interested in human beings and our ability to generate energy and therefore electricity, and how we can be able to utilize that. So just a little smattering of that, but hopefully that charges you all up for some interesting things to come in the future. So that's what we'll say of that. So,
yeah. Cool. Yeah. No, we were, as we were prepping for this episode, Mike and I were chatting, and we were talking about sort of the mechanics of how we do the show. Yeah. And we actually started, we just started, and essentially, but we started using Google Docs at the beginning. But now we use a shared Apple Notes note, or a series of notes that we share across. And I had pasted in a graphic for Mike recently prior to the show, and it was a screenshot of our episode number 1 on our hosting platform. And the funny thing was, it at that moment had exactly 200 downloads. So we thank all 200 of you for listening to episode 1.
Funny that episode 1 has 200 downloads, and obviously we thank everyone for listening to the other ones. It's huge that we've had a lot of episodes that we've kept it up. So I want to say thank you to Jeff for doing all the work and kind of getting those published and up. But and I definitely thankful for that, because it takes time every week to listen to it, put it up there. I think we've done pretty good to not have any snafus with audio. We had one or two that was like, I think the one was when your power went out, which we talked about that multiple times.
We talked about that a lot, yes.
Yeah, trying to fix those type of things. But interesting podcast statistics. So I think for people who are going out, and podcasts have definitely not gone away since we started. In fact, they're probably getting stronger and stronger.
Exponentially larger, yeah.
Yeah, and so for people listening to this or just listening to get some interesting things on batteries, but maybe you're interested in maybe your own podcast someday. If you have over 32 downloads, you're in the top 50% of all podcasts. So that's interesting. And would you find out about our show, Jeff?
Oh yeah, we every episode we have more than that, which we're happy to.
Yeah, we're happy about that. And most podcasts don't make it past 10 episodes. So people start, but then they don't keep going. So, and I think for us, we had a question about that. We weren't sure if there was going to be enough content to be able to talk about batteries, and definitely weren't sure if it was 4 years worth. And wow, there's still so much out there. In fact, there's just a plethora of things. If I watch some videos from CES, it's amazing. And almost every one of these apparatuses are coming from batteries. In fact, one of the most amazing things I saw was these earphones that may replace the hearing aids. So they were, I honestly don't remember the brand, but they allowed you to be able to use your phone to look at the people. And at CES, obviously, the exhibit hall is pretty loud. Right. So the person put the earphones in and then had a picture of the person they were talking to and tapped on it, and it isolated that person solely. And then there were 3 other people that were talking, and you could tap them, and then it got the other people into the conversation.
That's pretty cool.
And obviously, one of the things these batteries last so long because you're having them in your ear if you're out having a conversation. So the batteries are no longer 2 foot tall zinc and silver discs, because that would not fit in there. In fact, the battery chemistry, Jeff, has changed quite a bit since we've been doing the show. Would you say that's fairly accurate?
Oh, it's constantly changing for sure.
Yeah.
And as we've found out, as we've discovered, it's new for us. Of course, we're not the originators of all of this. There's a certain gentleman that we'll mention in a few minutes, who we have to thank for lithium ion batteries, but there are various chemistries, and we didn't know about many of these. And we'll go over some of them because they have very different uses. They have different properties, different characteristics, and that's what makes one type of chemistry better for a certain application versus another. Yeah.
And lead acid, we think, one of the first truly rechargeable batteries that were out there. And that's something, as we said and mentioned in episode 1, still in use today. And still in use today, like as we're doing episode 200. Lead acid batteries are used quite a bit. And I think you're starting to see more people put lithium-ion batteries in their cars that are not ICE cars, or I should say that are ICE cars, because they last a little bit longer. They have a longer charge. But lead acid is still out there and being used. We look at other types of batteries. Nickel metal hydride. I think I have a couple of nickel metal hydrides sitting right here. But I would agree with you. The battery that's out there right now, in most use, in most current applications, whether it's in your iPhone, whether it's in your MacBook Air, whether it's in your Chromebook, whether it's in your Tesla, whether it's in your whatever you have, is a lithium ion battery. And Jeff and I talked about this. We want to actually thank John B. Goodenough. And we became introduced to him really on episode 148, which was November 8th, 2022. We learned about, I think it's Dr. Goodenough, but I might be wrong.
Yes,
I thought it was a PhD.
Yes.
And he was honestly the first one to come up with the rechargeable lithium-ion battery. Unfortunately, as we've been doing the show, and while I think one of the weeks before we did, Dr. Goodenough passed away on June 25th, 2023, at the age of 100 in Austin, Texas. So we definitely want to recognize, I would say, one of the modern fathers. I'm just saying that because clearly Andreas Volta has been passed away for a fair amount of time, but
a little bit of time.
But he's been named because we all see volts that are out there for sure. But John B. Goodenough probably is the father, I guess we would say grandfather, of today's modern rechargeable battery. And even that lithium battery has changed quite a bit throughout the 200 episodes we've had. I would say.
For sure.
So,
so we also did another episode, 184, shortly after his passing on July 18th, 2023, titled Remembering John B. Goodenough. So if you're interested in Mr. Goodenough, then we've got a couple of episodes for you.
Yeah, which is definitely something that he deserves for all the contributions he had for a long number of years. And if we look at his ability, great educator, very passionate about everything that he was doing. Graduated from Yale, also served in the military. Yeah, there he is, his PhD in physics at the University of Chicago. So, and the MIT Lincoln Laboratory. So, as I said, he went to some pretty prestigious schools, and and it was the head of inorganic chemistry laboratory at the University of Oxford. So, I mean, come on, he's clearly like
he's an impressive gentleman.
Impressive gentleman, yeah, definitely for sure. But lithium batteries, Jeff, have they changed a little bit in their chemistry? Granted, they still have lithium, but they
are all lithium based. Yes.
Yeah.
So, and that's why you'll often, or if you've listened to a number of our shows, we'll throw out these acronyms, and we're just going to go over some of those and maybe discuss the applications for them. And we're going to start with LFP. And LFP is lithium iron phosphate batteries. And excuse me, they have a nominal voltage, now that we know what volts are, of 3.2 volts. So doing some quick math, multiplying that by 4 brings us out to 12.8 volts, which makes them the most common type of lithium battery to replace the 12-volt lead-acid deep cycle battery.
Exactly. Yep.
And certainly one of the benefits is their weight compared to lead-acid, right? So they're much lighter, and their energy density is large, and they have a life cycle rating of about 2,000 cycles.
Yeah. And that's where you see in a lot of your standard power stations. So pretty much anything, if you buy a Blue Eddy, if you buy a Jackery, if you buy a EcoFlow today, and Jeff and I have some earlier EcoFlows, they're not lithium iron phosphate batteries, but today your newer ones have that. So the reality is if you're doing about 200 charge cycles a year, that's going to last you almost 10 years. Mm-hmm. And so we've only been doing that. By that standard, we've only been doing the show for 4 years. So the battery should still be outlasting the show. But what'll be probably the most groundbreaking part is what's the next thing? And I think we both agreed and talked about solid state batteries are the next piece. I think.
Or at least it appears that way right now. We don't.
Well, the iron and iron air batteries are coming up to be there, just because the cost. And we've talked about the fact that lithium's difficult, hard rock mining, or you desalinate it, so that's hard. But iron is pretty prevalent. We've got a fair amount of that, even from a recycling standpoint, and obviously air. Now it's a little bit more complicated than that, but it is fairly prevalent. So I think there's some options there. But you want to go over a couple other lithium ion batteries that are out there too? Yeah,
for sure. One more thing about the LFP is that they're likely they're one of the safest batteries because their threshold for high temperatures allows them to at least keep thermal runaway at bay better than some other lithium cells.
Agreed.
So lithium cobalt oxide is the next one we're going to talk about. And these are actually super common because they are the ones that we use every day, likely in our smartphones and laptops, tablets, and cameras, etc. They have a high specific energy, so high energy density in them. They suffer, however, from relatively short lifespans.
Mm-hmm.
So in the 500 to 1,000 cycle range. And just to remind our listeners, when we talk about cycles, especially on LCO batteries, as to they are commonly referred, we're not talking about every time you plug it in.
Right.
So that's not a charge cycle. A charge cycle is a usage of 100% of the capacity of the battery over time. And we often give the example of you start with 100%, you use 50% of it in one day, you plug it in, you do the same thing the next day, and that counts as one
right
charge cycle.
Yeah.
So do you want to take the next one?
I'll be honest, I didn't have it prepped up. So you can grab it.
Okay. No worries. We got it. So the next one is LMO, which I don't think we've mentioned on the show.
No, I don't think we have.
Not specifically, but we've mentioned things that are run with this type of battery. It's the lithium manganese oxide battery, and they're often found in power tools. We've talked about all sorts of different power tools. We're talking about the 18 or 24 volt, Makitas and Ryobis and whatnot that you're putting on drills and other power tools. They charge quickly. They offer good power, but their lifespan isn't great. So they're in the lowest range of 300 to 700 charge cycles before those batteries are done and need to be replaced.
Right. And I'll grab the next one because it's the same one because I had that one prepped. But the LMO batteries, right?
That's what we just did.
Right. So, but LMO and LCO, if we look at those, I think one of the interesting parts is I think you're going to start to see those start to change a little bit. And I can tell you even from my Ryobis is that you're starting to see them discount those batteries and start to add some new lithium batteries. And I actually saw one or two out there that were lithium iron phosphate batteries, but they were only paired and can only be used with the brushless motors. And I just guess I want to put that out there because with the brushless motors, there's less resistance and therefore there's increased ability for charge cycles. So I thought just a little aside to that. So sorry for rehashing those ones, but
no, it's all good.
Yeah. So what are we going to go through next?
The next one.
Yeah.
The next one, and the next one needs a little more explanation because
they're called different things in different states, right? Yeah. So and I don't mean like Maine versus New Hampshire. So.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the next one is which we've mentioned quite a bit, the lithium ion NMC, which is nickel manganese cobalt, and these you see everywhere, mostly in EVs, although that's changing or has already is in the process of changing. Super high energy density, super long life cycle. The drawback, unfortunately, is that they're cobalt based, and obtaining cobalt is not a great situation in our world. However, there are subtypes of NMC, and you'll often see NMC 111, NMC 622, and NMC 811 are the three most common. They refer to the relative percentages of, if you will, amounts of each of those three compounds in the battery. So NMC 111 has equal amounts of nickel, manganese, and cobalt. 622, there's 60% nickel, 20% manganese, 20% cobalt, etc.
Exactly. The next one we'll talk about, and I don't think we've talked about this one too much, is the lithium ion NCA battery, which is a nickel, cobalt, aluminum oxide battery. Higher specific energy, so that's good, with decent specific power and long life cycle. So they can deliver a high amount of current for extended periods of time. This is very good. Biggest benefit, high energy. The drawback, and this is a pretty big drawback, they're not as safe as other lithium technology and are expensive in comparison. And I think that's again, one of these pieces of the cobalt, right? I had a discussion with somebody, interesting enough. I didn't realize, obviously, cobalt mining in the Congo there is. But did you know that when you are smelting copper, cobalt is actually a byproduct that's there? The only difference that I guess is hard is that it's difficult to be able to cut and mine that cobalt. You actually have to like essentially use a torch to a plasma torch to actually cut through it. So the amount of energy it takes to be able to then get that out is more. So it's just kind of funny. I wanted to say, I was like, well, that's not really a good scenario. So it's more energy intensive to make the battery than it's worth the energy in the battery. So not a good thing. But you want to go over the next one, which is an interesting battery because it has some applications because of its chemistry is a little bit different.
Yeah, and it's a chemistry that's different in where it is in the battery. So all the previous lithium battery types we've talked about are the changes in the chemical makeup of the cathode material, positive end of the battery. LTO, or lithium titanate batteries, replace the graphite in the anode, which is the negative side, with lithium titanate and use LMO or NMC as the cathode chemistry. The result is a super safe battery with a long lifespan, and it charges faster than any other lithium battery.
Yeah.
So great for EV applications, charging stations, wind and solar energy, telecom, aerospace, all sorts of good stuff. They are not super energy dense, which is a drawback. So it stores a lower amount of energy relative to its weight. So that's that.
Yeah. I do think that we're going to see, if we say next 200 episodes, I definitely think solid state batteries, once they come out, are going to be the thing, because we have yet to see that many lithium iron phosphate batteries come into the EV world. Like, there's a couple vehicles out there, but most of them are cobalt based that are out currently. Most people are driving around. So once we get lithium iron phosphate batteries out there, and then you start getting more of the solid state batteries, we're just going to see, and we've already said they're talking 500, 1,000 mile ranges on some of these newer batteries that, say, Toyota's producing. The difference is we're going to start to see technologies change. As we said, we quickly mentioned a little bit about iron air batteries, and really the goal of iron air batteries is the storage of it for long periods of time. So I think you want to think about this as a difference of, like, you have your car and you drive your car and it's sitting for a while. That's not the ideal application for worth looking at lithium ion batteries. But iron air batteries, it's more of that, hey, we might have had a bunch of solar. We have this duck curve. We have too much of it and we want to store it, but then we're not using all of it the next day, maybe in our house or in the grid. The best part about iron air batteries is 100 hours with very low costs compared to other applications. And that's where I think if iron air technology comes to be more fruitful, is that ability for that to be, you'll see more power plants that are actually storage of this power for longer periods of time. And that's the help to making truly grid scaled storage important. And that's what I hope, if I'm kind of forward-looking statements for us, is to start seeing more of this where a blackout is not going to happen because we've got some energy stored. I mean, now
resiliency in the grid.
So resilient. I mean, even now with the number of power stations that I have, I know here. I mean, I've got 3 EcoFlows, Blue Eddy. I've got enough to honestly be able to power my own house for a period of time, without having an extreme expensive cost where I had to put Tesla Powerwall in or some other type of storage. Although we've seen recently talk about CS and batteries, it was huge. I mean, Blue Eddy came out with a major storage device. EcoFlow definitely did with the Ultra series that they have, I think going up to 96 watt hours And then, sorry, 96 kilowatt hours. 96
hours.
kilowatt hours. Had to add the extra zero there. But 96 kilowatt hours, I mean, realistically, that's multiple days. That could be a month's worth of energy storage for most people. So I think more to come in batteries. The important part for us, I think, is we're not going away. Batteries definitely are not going away. I think we can make a sure amount for that. And I think that it's going to continue to be more and more interesting. You never know. We may see that first ability to be able to put some, what I'm hearing is some potentially battery storage on the moon. I think that's the next part. And I don't see why we wouldn't do that. Like, how are these batteries going to stand up when we put them on someplace other than the Earth? And I think there's this gentleman that owns a couple different companies, one of which is Tesla, that he's going to want to figure that out. And Elon Musk, clearly his journey to trying to figure out how to get people to Mars, it's like, okay, let me come up with batteries. You're going to need that in a spaceship for sure.
Yeah.
You're going to need probably some solar to charge those batteries up. Clearly SpaceX, you're going to need the spaceship. So he's trying to build out all these little extra things that are there. So I'll throw something out there too with my idea of X to energy. I think those people that are on those things are going to need to be staying fairly fit, and why not try to utilize some of the power that they're creating in this process to be there in case, well, you go someplace and those solar panels aren't charging the batteries. I think your human beings can be helpful in that process too. So
we're not quite going to the Matrix there, but
no, we're not. I know. I've watched the videos, and every time I say that to everybody, I was like, no. So they were passive. They were sitting there, and they were using the heat from there, which is like, we'll probably have Jim Gregory back on, who was on one of our episodes in Pedal PC about. He actually did a little bit of analysis of the fact that, actually when we exercise, and I do think it's important. Once you exercise for a period of time, we get warm. And that once we have enough of that warmth, we sweat. And if we give off that heat in an area. We've all seen that. So maybe there's some way to co-create some energy there too. But one of the things I want to finish with for the show is to say that thank you again, because we often say you are the power that helps us keep going. And I'll say we don't look at every metric of our episodes, and it's not that piece, because we're in the minority, ironically, of podcasts that have gone over 200 episodes right now that don't monetize their podcasts. And for some of you know that we don't. It's not something that we push all the time. You're not going to hear advertisements on there. We will talk about some brands and some products to be able to say, hey, that we like them and we use, and we mentioned some of them today. Pale Blue, we use a bit. That's in a bunch of my things, and Tom's been on the show multiple times. So we're going to talk about companies that we like, that we use, and some things there. But we just want to thank all of you for listening, because it does motivate us to see how many downloads we get, and it's nice to be able to see. So appreciate that. We hope that all of you stay fully charged, as we said multiple times, or at least 80%, because that's a good range. And we hope you join us for another 200 episodes, and we're able to continue to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. And there's a chance we might be going back to weekly. So
okay,
we're gonna discuss that and figure out when that's going to happen. But that feels like the right time to
it feels like the right time.
Settle back into a weekly show.
We get more of a groove and grind now.
Yes, we do.
Sounds good. Well, keep your batteries charged, stay good, and maybe someday you'll get 21 gigawatts of electricity powered in your household too.
Thanks again.
Wow. Here's an interesting stat. 53% of successful podcasts have published more than 200 episodes. Only 3% of podcasts who have published over 200 episodes do not monetize their shows. How's that? How's that?
We're a couple of 3%ers, Mike. This is good.
Right. Wow.